Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to MSP Community Live. Surprisingly, I am actually here for an episode. I feel like I haven't been on the show in a month just about, with all the traveling. And one of the places I was traveling was Right of Boom, where Josh and I went on a run at 6 in the morning in the middle of Vegas. So that was
Sure
pretty
was.
awesome.
Yeah, there was 20 people who said they'll be there, and the 20 people turned into 3, so we stuck it out.
Yes. Three. You know what though? Massive credit to everyone who showed up, and credit to everyone who said they would go too, because the intentions were right, even if the execution wasn't there. Vegas is tough. We'll be doing this at MSP GeekCon and IT Nation Secure and all the conferences coming up, and I expect a bigger turnout on those. So, Josh, how are you doing this morning?
Not too bad. I didn't get up at 6 a.m. and run today, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but pretty good. The kids are out of school today for Easter, so
Nice.
they're running amok. So one of them might make a guest appearance. I'll try my best not to. But looking forward to a nice, relaxing Friday, doing some testing of security products today. So that's always fun.
So are you testing to see if they're effective in
I
stopping everything? Are you
Yes,
testing to see if they're supportable and easy to install, or all of the
the
above?
the first, actually, the fun part where I have a test VM and I run ransomware simulations and PowerShell simulations and see if it stops them. So the fun part.
Nice, nice. Well, that's fantastic. All right, so like we always do at MSP Community Live, we discuss stories that came up in the previous week on Reddit. So Simon, can we pull up the first story and let's get to it? So I have not read these, by the way. Josh has, I think. But let's talk about this. Becoming an MSP, I just don't get it. Been self employed, so one man computer service, okay, one man band, consulting business for 20 years, 97% of revenues from billable hours. I wonder if that's an exact figure or if he's just hyperbole. Residential work, ouch. Seems that everywhere I turn, people on our side of the fence, techs, business owners are saying that break fix is dead. MSP is the way to go. Thing is, I just don't see that. Only one small business customer I lot. Not sure they went to an MSP. Like to boost my income. Like to make recurring revenue. Automatic. Make money while I sleep. Yeah, that sounds nice. Realize what I have is a job, not really a business. Yep. No discrimination. This is a long post. I wonder what the character limit on Reddit is. I don't get is where all these small businesses that want to pay a monthly fee, $5,200 forever. Yep. Okay. So it's a mindset shift to explain the value. So what's the ultimate question here? Can you offer me some advice and direction? Wow, that's a lot to take in. Um,
Yeah, so it basically, he's really like, hey, I'm in the break fix mindset and I don't understand the MSP mindset. I might want to go that way, but help me understand. The other side of this, yeah, the residential. I see Ray 2024 is
yes,
the years of residential HP. Have you ever had to do residential support?
miserable,
Yeah,
just awful.
it's it has its ups and downs. I mean, I
I'm
mostly
curious to
downs,
hear
but
the ups.
the ups was kind of the cool people. I remember at one point, the governor's mom, I had to fix a hard drive on, and she was in a retirement community. And I go in this retirement community, and like I was the talk of the town. Like everyone is like waiting, like, oh, you're the
I'm
computer guy,
sure.
you're the computer guy, like coming to fix it. And I spent like 5 minutes diagnosing and 40 minutes just talking about random stuff. So it was super interesting. There was another lady I helped where she was the cowgirl of the, like, in the Cowboy Hall of Fame. So like,
Didn't know there
lots of
was one.
yeah, lots of cool like cars and stuff like that, and just chatting with her. And the issue was is her computer didn't turn on. Well, she had the computer plugged into those like extension cords, and the extension cord end of the power, instead of being plugged into the wall, was plugged into itself. So obviously didn't provide the infinite power. I mean, a quick minute fix, but I
Right.
spent like an hour at her house just like talking to her. So it was honestly more of just like hanging out and getting to meet cool people than actually fixing things. But the other downside of it too is, yeah, you're working on like old resident class printers,
Old machines, no
computers. Yeah,
standardization, right?
yeah,
Just whatever pile of stuff they happen to have around. And back in the day, it used to be you would have to remove like 37 toolbars from those machines
yeah,
when you logged into them.
yeah. Bonsai
I don't
Buddy
think
is
those really
sitting on the
exist anymore.
desktop. uh,
Um, but to the poster's point and to his question, I think one of the key things here, and one is kind of fun just to talk about residential and how much I dislike doing residential work. I don't even like fixing my own PC, let alone other people's. The residential market, for the most part, is going. The fact that he's working in that arena changes his perspective on break fix versus MSP. And the reason I say that is, aside from maybe some very wealthy individuals or like high status households or things like that, you're not going to get residential to pay for recurring revenue at all ever. Like maybe you can get them to pay for a backup service or something, but even then, you're probably not reselling it. You're probably just setting them up with their own credit card and saying, "Hey, put in your account here." And I think if this person is thinking of going down or why he's finding it so difficult to comprehend, it's that he's focused on this residential side of it, right? That's different. That makes it hard to sell and hard for them to get into that mindset of managed services versus break fix, because to the residential person, they really do want that plumber analogy, right? In my old company, we used to say, we are not the plumber, right? We don't just come and fix the thing when it's broken. We're offering to truly manage these systems. And you've all heard my thoughts on that. Um, so I think that's his main issue here, is that he needs to be finding or starting to get into more mature environments and clients to start going down this road. What do you think, Josh? Any other points
No, I
where you
think you
disagree?
nailed it. No, I think you nailed it because the if you think about like in very basic terms, what the MSP is supposed to do is, hey, I have an organization who either isn't big enough or doesn't have enough money to have a IT person on staff. I mean, there's a lot of other things to it, but like let's just take basic form. That's what an MSP is. Hey, you don't want a single IT guy on staff. You pay for
Yep.
us, and now you get all of our IT people. And if you're looking at residential or that kind of thing, they don't have a need for a IT person on staff. Where so same thing, they're not going to have a need for the MSP on staff. There's just going to call when things are broke and they need it fixed. Even if he is on like the small businesses inside of it too, like again, your plumber analogy, you're not really looking into it as like, well, something's broke, come in and fix it. Whereas your MSP is, we're going to try to prevent it from getting to the point of breaking, making sure that you stay uptime. And some of that is tricky. I mean, you have those like super small shops or shops that aren't super reliant on technology. Like the best one that comes to mind is like a um, uh, auto body repair shop, right? They have their computers that do POS, maybe do some part orderings and things like that. But the
Yep.
vast
Yep.
majority of them, I mean, there's two laptops, maybe one's running QuickBooks, right? It's really hard to get them to see that need for it when it's just it's there, they need it, and they would probably rather just call when things are broke. So yeah, you kind of have to have that mindset. Maybe look at your target market a little bit differently, or I guess coming up with ways like the Geek Squad method, where maybe you pay a monthly fee for I don't know whatever their plans are now, but I used to work at one I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and you obviously got the antivirus, but then you could pay like a monthly fee, and then like all your calls and stuff were covered. So it's kind of like having you on retainer. So that'll get you your
Yeah.
reoccurring revenue.
The other point though I want to make is that there is a market for this,
Mhm.
right? Like I know we as an industry harp on recurring revenue and have kind of made the point that break fix is bad and you should be moving to managed services and all of that. And while I do, of course, think managed services is the way to go, if this guy is making money doing break fix, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing inherently that says he needs to change that model unless he, really wants to. And you know, this can be a little bit of a case of grass is greener too, because he talked about I want to make money in my sleep. Now, we've all worked in MSPs. That's not really the way it works with managed services, right? You're constantly trying to make sure that all these monthly recurring agreements are actually profitable based on how much time you spend dealing with all this stuff. Um, so just as a counterpoint to what he's necessarily asking, if he's making enough money now, and like the break fix market is not going away ever, right? There's always going to be, for these little tiny shops, right? Maybe they only have 2 computers and no servers now. There could still be a play for him in there. So just managed services is not magical either, right? There's downsides to it too, and this notion that I saw in the post of uh, make money while I sleep. I mean, I guess it's technically true in that the revenue's coming in no matter what. When you start looking at how much time you spend on these, when you realize you don't get the bill extra when it takes you 2 weeks to recover from the ransomware event, depending on how your agreements are structured and all that, may not be as green as he thinks the grass is.
Yep. And honestly, it's going to take a complete shift in mindset too, because it's not just, hey, I'm going to go from break fix to reoccurring. I'm going to go from break fix to completely standardizing your environment, finding a security stack or a solution stack, your antivirus, your RMM agent and all that stuff. Like, now you have a standard you're rolling out and adhering to. There's going to be a lot more that goes into it other than just, all right, I'm going to switch from break fix to a reoccurring revenue model.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a switch to flip, right? Many organizations have spent years trying to do this, to do it properly. It takes time.
Yep.
All right, I think we can move on to the next story. We beat this one to death. Sales team blatantly ripping off customers. This is a sore subject for those of us in vendor space. So, of my clients, okay, that I'm the lead tech for, media advertisement company. Okay, so before I even read this, is this going to be one of those, I, the tech, need to deliver on what sales promised stories?
No, it's a pretty short one.
No?
So,
Okay, that was what I.
the TLDR here is, the sales guy is quoted a server for pretty ridiculous price. So it's not so much like a deliver, it's more overpriced, and maybe not even over provisioned, but just completely overpriced based on the information given.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Hardware is very old. Got a quote from our sales team: $60,000 for a server. Wow. Can I get that server like in my house?
Oh.
Actually, I don't want that anymore. I have no servers at home these days. No backups, no labor, no RDS cals, SQL Server, no SQL Server cals, I see also. Nothing else included on that, just the server, OS license, user cals.
So we're
Invoice
talking
has the audacity to state the retail price is $180K. Wow. This isn't a case of a client with tons of capital requesting the extreme performance options, just massively over-provisioned server. Vendor pricing pushed on a financially struggling company. Sorry for the language, which we did not repeat in the recording. But I am beyond pissed and curious if you guys have any suggestions of what I can do without putting. Okay.
So my playing complete devil's advocate here. We all clearly know, based on the information given, that a $60,000 server is probably complete overkill for most businesses, and it sounds like this is the case. But is this one of those? I'm trying to think of the polite way to put it, but the FU quotes, I guess, to pose it like, hey, we don't really want to do this, or we don't have time, so here's this like outrageous quote that you're like not going to say yes to in any way, shape, or form, and if somehow you miraculously do, then it's like, oh well, okay, I guess it's worth our time now.
I mean, maybe this is just an ethics thing. If I ever had a project like that, that reflected in the labor rate, not
Yep,
in the.
that's true.
And I didn't really like doing that anyway. I don't really believe in the that style of quote, like if I don't want the business, I'll just tell the person asking that
Yeah.
we don't have the capacity right now.
Yeah, just to
Um,
make it clear, that's not how I operate either, but I'm trying to wrap my head around how this possibly could have come about. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
I mean, from the technical side, and I do have a lot of like sales background and do a lot of sales engineering stuff. Like I can't ethically or morally make that. Like I would whatever the right solution is. I mean, my previous MSP, a lot of what my job was replacing the servers. I was the cloud guy. It's like, hey, we don't need your server. How can we do this with Azure AD or enter a whatever SharePoint Exchange? So I'd be looking at like ways to save them money. I think the right thing to do is to find the right solution, because sometimes the right solution is a server. There's no going away from that. Sometimes you need that on-prem, but I mean, building the quote out, and I guess if the client doesn't want to go that way, then you just say, well, this is a solution we're offering, and go from there. But yeah,
Well,
six,
I'm trying to think what would have to go into a single server to make it 60K, right?
lots of
You know,
storage.
right? You hear 60K, you're thinking like low end SAN or like an HP MSA or something like that. Um, and I'm wondering, like I couldn't tell exactly from the post, but I'm almost wondering if this person is saying, right, the hardware wasn't even worth 60K, right? They just massively marked it up. Like it was a
Yep.
normal, 1U, like 8 core single processor kind of deal. And to me, it almost sounded like he's saying our sales guy is just blatantly making stuff up. And to answer his direct question, what can he do without putting his job in jeopardy? I got the feeling that this was, um, a lead engineer, or what some organizations would call a TAM or a VCIO or a position like that. And the answer there is really the only thing he can do is take it up the management chain. Um, that's the conversation to have, right? If you're not that person's supervisor, if you're not that person's um, manager or anything like that, there's a couple things here. One, you can't blow up the deal with the client, right? You can't like be in the client meeting and say, "What are you doing, client?" That's just
Yep.
completely unprofessional. Um, Internally, take that up with whoever the CEO of the company, the owner of the company, whoever that next person is for you. Then have that conversation if that's what's happening. I almost read this as like,
Well,
they tried to sell a 1U pizza box as a 60K server.
yeah. The other thing too is again trying to think of ways that like could what if the client asked for this? What if they were talking to somebody, or they got on whatever eBay, and they're like, oh, all flash storage, all flash array, like this is the new hot thing, like I want it. And you just quoted it without going down like the sales engineer, where it's like, hey, let me bring a technical person, let's do an assessment of your environment and see if this is the right solution. So from building off of your point, and the advice I'd have to the tech is like, okay, you've seen the quote, but what else went into it? I mean, yeah, don't be in the client meeting calling yourself out, but have the internal huddle,
Yes.
maybe talk with the sales guy and say, hey, why was this quoted? And is this the right solution? Can we figure out something a little bit better? Because yeah, it would be great if you could sell that $60,000 server with that insane markup. I mean, we're in the business to make money, obviously, but if it's not the right solution, then that's not something you'd want to do. It's like, is it worth potentially losing a client over making one big sale?
Yeah, and right there's a lot of pieces we're missing here. Was this engineered? Is there some like massive application that maybe needs this level of hardware? Probably not, but you never know. I don't want to completely discount that. Um, it does raise to a little bit of a bigger point, and we can talk about this in some later story maybe. When you start developing your project capabilities as an MSP, you have to have some internal discussions about who's architecting this and who's responsible for the outcome after the architect, right? When we started doing this, we would have somebody make the engineering quote and then kind of wash their hands of it. And if it turned out to not be the right solution, well, not my problem anymore. That's not good either, right? So that does get into a deeper discussion of what your engineering and architect and process looks like. But that'll take us down a deep rabbit hole. Maybe we'll come back if we have time.
Well, instead, I think let's go ahead and go to the next one here. I'm going to pull that up. This is another interesting one. So this is, what if your customer stops paying for a product where you as the MSP are still contractually obligated to continue paying the vendor? How do you protect? So it looks like in this one here, it's a pretty short post. Do you ask your client for the full amount, which is $30K up front, sign a contract? This particular MSP is selling a service to his client, but he'd be in contract with the vendor directly for 15 months. The vendor won't end the contract simply because my client stops paying, and they won't go direct with the client. What do you do?
So I assume, right, the example we're all most familiar with on this is Microsoft. Other vendors do this. The way we always handled it was we wouldn't make them pay the full amount up front, but we would have a separate clause, or maybe even a separate contract that stated you are responsible for the entirety of the recurring subscription service, separate from your managed IT services, and no one ever really balked at that. If they did, we wouldn't sell it to them. Have you heard of anyone making clients pay the entire thing up front?
I haven't heard of that either. I mean, maybe like some sort of what I've heard is, if they do require that, going through some sort of like financial like loan or whatever, like, hey, we require this 30K up front, but obviously if you're not writing a check for 30K, you can do some sort of like a loan through this other company that we work with, and then then the MSP gets the 30K, but then they pay that other company,
Yeah,
kind of like a
just like
loan.
hardware leasing
Yeah,
companies, the way
yeah.
they do it.
Yep. So I've heard of that being done with it, because we ran into that a couple times in my previous MSP, where we'd quote like hardware and stuff like that, and then we as the MSP didn't offer any financing, but we had a institution that they could go with, like, hey, here's your $60,000 server,
Right.
and then here's the option to to kind of pay for it over time. So that would be another option. But I mean, the right answer is, like you said, it's amending the MSA or having a separate contract for it.
And that's what I've heard basically everyone do, right? Well, I've heard an unfortunately large number of MSPs not do anything and then be bit by this at the end. But just making your contract state that maybe this outlives the contract, or whatever your lawyer, like how they tell you to phrase it, that seems to be the only standard solution. And it's no different than if you do a migration project or you buy hardware where you make them pay for the hardware up front, right? Same exact principle.
Yeah, I'm almost curious, like, as to what this potentially could be. What is this very specific thing that they need that they won't go direct with? But that's
And 15 months, that's an interesting term too.
it is, yeah. 30K, 15 months. Yeah, it's interesting to see what it is, and like, is it something they can resell to their other clients? There's a lot of questions I have with that, but I think the other thing too is, if the vendors aren't willing to go direct, and the client isn't willing to pay upfront for it, then I mean, almost then it's like, well, we don't have a deal, because
Well,
that's
let
a
me
lot of
ask
risk to
you.
take on.
This brings up a good point. It's a little bit of a tangent. In your experience, when you run into these one-off applications that maybe one client or two clients use, do you go down the road of becoming an authorized reseller of them, or especially if it's a SaaS solution or some kind of software subscription, or do you have the client just purchase it, or does it depend on what it is?
I think it would depend on what it is, but typically, it would be client would go direct, and then we would assist as part of like the service. Like, yeah, we can contact support on your behalf, but we don't own this product. We don't own the licensing or anything like that. We'll help support it the best we can, and by support it, that means if there's anything that comes up, we'll
Yeah.
contact support on your behalf to find it. Yeah, if it's not one where we can resell in the catalog of like a Pax8 or an Ingram or a TD or anything like that, or if it's a one-off, it's I think that just becomes a billing headache for the people in the billing department, and it's be way easier just to have the client go direct.
We were the same way, unless something was used by clients all over the place and there was some real benefit to us reselling it. And usually the percentage points, that you would make from it is like basically nothing anyway. So it wasn't a financial motivation. Um, at least for me, and this was always a controversial subject inside my own company, let alone to other organizations. I didn't want to do it because it led to the clients saying the following phrase, but I bought it from you and now it's not working.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the licensing point too, because yeah, like it's the amount you would make really isn't too much with it too. But then there's the other thing too with it, and something we look at when it comes to vendors is what happens if a client is offboarded. Like, do they still have the solution then? Like, what does that headache look like? So if this is a particular one-off thing and now you're the authorized reseller of it and the client gets bought out, let's go on a positive note here. If they're leaving you because they were
Right.
purchased by somebody else, like how do you transfer that over now? It's the one
Right.
single instance you have.
It totally depends on the vendor, right? Sometimes you
Yeah.
can just say, here's the client's account number and send it to this new reseller. And sometimes if it's software, you have to like uninstall the whole thing and reinstall with the new license key.
Yeah. Yeah. So for one-offs, my advice is just have them go direct, and then you're going to make your money back with the labor of supporting it.
Yes. I will say, and then I'll leave this topic alone because we're on a deep tangent here, is that we did try to sub out things that we could with any regularity. So things like cabling work, right? Instead of saying go contract with this cabling vendor, we would try and coordinate all that on our side. And you actually could make some decent profit on that. And the client like not having to deal with them direct. So my advice, or at least my strategy, was to sub out things when we could, but not software or software licensing.
Yeah. Be the trusted advisor. I mean, yeah, when it comes to like the service side, like you probably have connections with a trusted vendor that you can recommend or work with. But yeah, I wouldn't want to have to maintain all of the software in the catalog and make sure like, oh, this client has this special deal where they have this one thing that's not in our normal stack. And yeah, thankfully I'm not in the billing department, but if I was, I can't imagine how much of a nightmare that can be. So
Yeah, it's not fun. Okay, well we can move on to the next story because we're way off the original question at this point anyway. How many MSPs have you worked in? Myself, it's three. Been in the space for around a decade. First, second most time at the second. Now the third has already eclipsed my tenure. The second, who eclipsed next week, by the way. We're right in the path here in upstate New York. What have been the key differentiators for you at the best MSPs you've worked for and in? I'm going to make a we love controversial statements here and say that on site presence is still an important component of good support. I don't disagree. I also think that trying to change your stack and tool set too often, man, I like this guy. It's usually a mistake because I agree with that too. Difficult to expand geographically, so you better have a good home base set up to start with. Okay. Um, Josh, how many have you worked in?
This is my third MSP. So I thought this was a fun question to kind of get some of our background on that. The first MSP I worked in would have been 2011 ish. So I came out from managing a call center of all places. That was a lot of fun. So I did ISP support for a ISP out of Arizona. Did tier one, tier two stuff for that, and then became a manager of a prepaid cell phone company account. So if you ever want war stories of calls I've taken from a call center, hit me up in the Discord. But then, yeah, got a job at a local MSP, and I was there for about 5.5 to 6 years, and then took a complete career shift and managed a restaurant. Was the general manager, or worked my way from a normal manager to kitchen manager to general manager to like store opening team of this franchise. So I worked there for about 3 years, and then
Really?
went back into the MSP world. So I worked for another MSP for 3 years, and now I've been with my current MSP for 1. So I would say MSP is about 10 years, IT in total about 15 if you count the break fix, the Best Buy, the Geek Squad, the call center, and then a little bit of internal and stuff. So the each of the MSPs I've worked on have been different various levels of maturity. The one I'm at now, absolutely love, and I mean the biggest difference I would say, not that my other two were bad by any means. It's just they're kind of operated a little differently. But what I really appreciate about my current one is the culture, that it brings, the like, very core values, and everything that we do is kind of based around those core values. Like, some of it is kind of, you get that like that cheesy like corporate mission statement, but it's nice to have like a tangible, like, this is our roadmap, this is our goals, this is how we do things, and everything we do ties into these core principles. So there's a lot of transparency about how we operate and what we're doing, what we're moving forward, and it just, to me, makes a bigger difference. And I really enjoy working for my current one.
Ooh, man, I have a lot to say about core values. We'll see if I can resist standing on the soapbox for this. Um,
I
so
mean,
my answer to the number of MSPs is depends on how you count them. Um, and the reason I say that is the answer is kind of one and kind of three, because it turned into three companies through M&As in the interim. But really, it was the same organization, just bigger and bigger as we went on. All right, so I was employee number like 6 or 7 or something at the original company, and we were working out of an old house at the time. Your typical like very small business. Everyone was just kind of doing whatever to keep the lights on. We barely had defined roles and all that. And by the end, we were obviously a pretty big organization with a national presence and offices all over the place, and just a very different company than the one I joined. Not necessarily better or worse, but a different kind of company, right? Different in scope and maturity and mission, right? That company's goal is to take over the world. That wasn't necessarily the original goal. I, though, would like to. There was one line in that I thought would make for a good discussion, and that was the question about his thoughts on on-site presence. And I would like to phrase it as, can you develop a good working client relationship, or an optimal one, for a client that's completely remote, right? Maybe they saw the salesperson originally, and maybe there was like an initial on-site for the onboarding. Um, we had clients like that, and I won't answer first to color you, but I'm curious if you had clients like that, yeah, maybe you did the onboarding and then you didn't really see them after that. Were you able to develop strong relationships, or as strong relationships, without that idea of being there? Or maybe after the pandemic, right? If somebody came on and everyone was scattered around the city, and you didn't have that walking through the office presence that we're used to having with clients, how did those relationships look like, and how did they work out?
So I'll preface by saying, like, current MSP, we're based in a location, and I would say majority of our clients are in that location, but we do have a little bit of nationwide reach. So, and a lot of what I do, I mean, pretty much everything I do, unless I'm visiting for a brief amount of time, is done remotely, and a lot of the contacts and things like that are all remotely. So I think it's important to, you could have cameras on, and have the check-ins and everything, and have the at least face-to-face via computer screen. But
Mhm.
I'll also say that nothing beats those face-to-face interactions. And let's say clients, like, I'm going to remove clients from this situation. we talk right of boom. I mean, we've talked in the Discord plenty of times. Everyone else, Ray, Brandon, the other people that were there. I mean, we've been hanging out in the Discord, but now, hey, we finally met in person, and I feel like I
Right,
got to know
right.
you a lot more on our brief run, and I think it again strengthened the relationship. And I feel the same way with the clients. Is when I did visit for my company last September, I went down and visited a couple clients. I have a much better relationship with those clients now because, hey, we've met face to face, and I've always been like that person. And honestly, it's my favorite part about working for an MSP is the ability to have all these different connections and see these different businesses and build these relationships. I've done internal IT, and it's like this is the same network. Like, yeah, I got to work with some cool people, but I really strive and enjoy meeting and building the relationships with the different people. And at my first MSP, that was what I really enjoyed is like I would go out and again I would spend like 20-30 minutes maybe fixing the issue, and the rest of it was just BSing with the employees. And we had a car
Yep.
dealership who would legitimately only deal with me. Now from a business aspect, that's terrible because if I'm busy or I can't get to them, like, they don't want that. And
Yeah,
then
please
when
don't do
when other techs come out there,
that.
they're like, well, Josh does this way and he can get it right, whatever. So from a business aspect, like that was terrible, but from a personal aspect, that felt pretty cool. And just having those good relationships. So yeah, like that. Nothing beats that face to face person greeting and relationship building. And I'm one of those weird IT guys that is really extroverted, so I strive off of that too.
So there is, I agree with you. I think there's no substitute for, I used to have this client that I would go to their office and like work for the afternoon, right? And there's no substitute for the connections you make with the client and their employees just from walking around the office a little bit, right? Like I didn't even have anything I had to do. I would go up and down the hall there in the cube row, right? It was big enough that it was like a cube farm, like you would see in office space, and just go say hi to everyone, right? You knew you didn't just know the C levels there, you knew the whole office, and those made such better clients long term, right? They're the ones that give you the capital to screw up later, right? You
Yep.
know them, you have relationships with them. So one day when that person's hard drive died and you have to be the bearer of bad news that it's your photos are missing because you didn't back them up to the server, they're forgiving because they know you, right? If you're this faceless corporation or just this person on the other end of the phone that they never have met and don't know, um, you don't have as much rope to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah, and
And
you
I think there's really something to building those up.
Yep. As I say, you hit the long term too. Like if you're the managed service provider providing that level of customer service, because again, tech is one side of what we do. Like we're a service provider, and that comes from customer service. And as weird as it sounds, a lot of that restaurant management experience it directly translates to MSP because it's customer service and doing the right thing. If you're building those relationships, it's a lot harder to leave because, hey, our new prospective MSP come in and they said that they can do everything cheaper and all this, but they might not know you on that personal level, like get that kind of experience, and that's where it makes a difference. And to your other point of messing up, this is a great time to tell the story of the worst mess up I've ever had in my
Ooh, I
technical
want to hear
career.
this.
So, working for a local college, and I had that rapport. I worked very closely with the two IT guys for this smaller community college, and worked in and out, and basically empathized with them. Like, man, like it sucks that you guys are the only two for this entire campus, and I'll do everything I can to help you. And I had a really good relationship with them. So I was the cloud guy, and I did a lot of Exchange migrations. So I had just got done doing like 3 in a row. And the migrations I had were completely getting rid of the on-prem Exchange server, going to Exchange Online. So it was time to do theirs. They were rocking Exchange 2010, I believe it was. So outdated, and they weren't going fully online. They were staying on hybrid. So I had to go from 2010 to I think 2016 at the time. And then they wanted to go hybrid with the Microsoft 365. So I went through and I did the Exchange, yada yada. I was following my KBs, like mindlessly doing it. Well, I couldn't get the 2010 Exchange servers to completely uninstall. That's, so okay, cool. I'll just do what I did the last 3 times and use ADSI edit to completely remove the Exchange servers.
Yep.
Well, it's following the KB, and I removed the Exchange server folder, not the 2010 folder. So if you're not familiar with what happens at that point, ADSI edit is basically regedit for Active Directory, and it royally breaks things. So the second after I did that, I started getting all these weird errors, and I was like, it hit me. I knew what I did, and it was bad. And I was like, I got like flushed in the face, and I was like, oh my god, like this is not good. This is
That's a tough restore.
it is bad. So yeah, the option it was like you can do an authoritative restore, but they had it wasn't just one domain. It wasn't a flat domain. They had like 2 forest domains because they had their main domain, the student domain. So an authoritative restore is kind of out of the option at that point. So I did the right thing, and I called my boss and I told him what I did, and his reaction was to laugh at me, which, to be fair, I guess it was funny. It was a pretty bad mess up. And then he's like, well, you're going to call Microsoft until you fix it. I'm like, all right, done. So call her a senior engineer, and she said the same thing, laughed at me, and then said, well, you got a mess, call Microsoft. So I get, tail between my legs. I called the client, and I was like, hey guys, I'm really sorry. I explained myself, like, I'm going to do everything I can to get this back up and going. And they didn't get mad. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
we understand. Like, it's fine. Do what you got to do. Let us know how to help, and like we'll get it working. And I called Microsoft and basically was like a 2-week, like every day, 8 to 5, was on the phone to Microsoft rebuilding this exchange. It was the best mess up I've ever had because I also learned the ins and outs of Exchange and how it works. So I learned everything there was to know about Exchange in those 2 weeks. But I got them back up and going, and I mean, they continue to be like, even though I messed up very, very bad, didn't get mad. They trusted that I was able to fix it, and they continue to trust me for years down the road on that. So again, if you didn't have that relationship, that might have ended a lot differently. Like, oh, what do you mean you broke our Exchange server and like we're not getting any email, and like, well, we're just going to find someone else that can fix this then. Like, get your hands off of our stuff.
Exactly. Right. We are in the relationship business. Without marginalizing or trivializing, the technical part is comparatively easy with what we do.
Yep.
Right. Service delivery and relationships. That's it. And I don't know if it's still like this. Back in when you're talking about, Microsoft would fix any problem for like whatever the fee was. I think it was around $400 at the time. And man, it was amazing. Like I remember I was dealing with a terminal server, and it was still called terminal server back then. And this guy came in and said, "Hey, it's a pretty slow night here. Let's fix all this other stuff while we're on the phone." Like, those guys are just amazing.
Yeah, that's what happened. Is we had the action pack, so it paid the 400 whatever it was, and then got it to the point where I was like, okay, I'm seeing what support's doing. Like, we can expedite this. But yeah, it's super cool. But unfortunately, I don't feel that Microsoft has that same level of support anymore. I honestly can't remember the last time I've escalated an issue and had a satisfactory result from them.
I haven't
But
called them in a while. It's one of the downsides
yeah,
to being out of the the MSP game. So we'll just take your judgment for it.
yeah. Yeah, it's also been a while on my part there, aside from little Microsoft 365 escalations. But the other point too, and I've been on other webinars and podcasts and said this too, is again, we're in the service providing industry, and I will take somebody, like, if you're trying to get into the industry or want to, is if you have that customer service experience, for the most part, I can teach you what buttons to push on a keyboard, but I can't teach a lot of those soft skills. So, having some good training, technical training and procedures is one thing, but yeah, that customer service, I mean, that's a good, really good skill to have in this industry.
Agreed. And it's the one more valuable, right? We can teach tech, we can teach how to's, we can teach all of that. We can't as easily, in my experience, at least, teach customer service and attitude and empathy. It's just not a hard skill that you can pass down that way. despite efforts to do so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's one of the huge things I preach. I think that's why I kind of been successful in this industry is the soft skills and relationship building. So I'll always preach it and will preach it forever.
Okay, so I don't think we have time for any more stories. This is a great conversation. We even went on a couple of tangents that I think were relevant and more so than some of the stories. Anything you want to talk about coming up, Josh, that the audience should know about?
On Monday, if you're not doing anything, I believe noon central, we're having our second iteration of the Diamond Dogs peer group meeting in the MSP community Discord. So come join that. We'll hang out for about an hour and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. If you want to talk about problems, if you want to talk about what games you're playing, if you want to talk about what movies you're seeing, just come hang out with us. So it's building those relationships through a voice chat, video if you want, and then when we see each other in person, it will just make it that much better.
Right, and from my side, biggest thing coming up for the ConnectWise world is IT Nation Secure. So registration is open for that. It's the security event for MSPs and not just about ConnectWise stuff. All industry security event. Registration is open. I think technically session submissions are open, but I think they close today. So get them in now if you want to be considered. And other than that, thanks everyone for tuning in.
This has been a broadcast of the